You probably think Ron Howard is Hollywood's sweet, easygoing director, right? The kind of guy everyone loves. And for the most part he is. But there's another side to him, one that you don't often see. Behind that famous smile, there's a hidden truth. Ron Howard has a list. A blacklist, to be exact. And it's made up of some pretty shocking names. These weren't just colleagues to him. Some were friends. Some were mentors. These were the people who helped him achieve greatness. But in the end, they helped tear down everything he'd worked so hard to build. We're talking about stars with fiery egos, outrageous on-set feuds, and moments that pushed even Hollywood's most patient man to his breaking point. So, here's the story of the top actors Ron Howard would never work with again, and trust me, you're not going to believe who made the list. Let's start with number 1, Jim Carrey. Now, we all know Jim Carrey as this big, zany force of nature, right? But in 2000, he wasn't just playing the Grinch in How the Grinch Stole Christmas, he became the Grinch. And that transformation, as chaotic as it was, nearly broke Ron Howard. Jim was brilliant, of course, but when you spend 8 hours a day trapped in layers of latex and fur, things start to get worse. Well, let's just say, a little tense. By the third day, Carrey wasn't just frustrated, he was unraveling. He was lashing out at anyone in his path, even Howard himself. One morning he ripped off his gloves and shouted, "You try acting inside a rubber coffin." The whole crew froze. Howard did his best to keep things cool, but the tension was palpable. Carrey started improvising his lines, tossing scripts aside like they didn't matter. It got so bad, Howard had to go to Universal executives, practically begging them to step in. And their solution? They brought in a Navy SEAL, a guy trained to withstand torture, to help Carrey cope with the costume. The movie became a holiday classic, but for Howard it was a personal war. He later admitted that the film aged him a decade. Jim, on the other hand, jokingly said the whole experience felt like being buried alive. And while they both smile when talking about it now, they know deep down it wasn't just the Grinch who changed that year, it was their relationship. When asked if he'd ever work with Carrey again, Howard simply said, "Jim is brilliant, but some brilliance burns too hot." Next up is number 2. Cillian Murphy. When Ron Howard cast Murphy in The Heart of the Sea in 2015, he thought he was bringing in a perfect partner. Murphy was known for his intelligence, his calm demeanor, and everything Howard valued. At first, it seemed like a match made in heaven. Murphy even called Howard the kindest director I've ever worked with. But as the production dragged on, with months of starvation diets, freezing water, and grueling shoots, the cracks started to show. The film demanded that the cast survive on just 600 calories a day to look convincingly emaciated. They spent hours soaked and shivering in the cold, and that's when things began to shift. Murphy, once enthusiastic, started feeling more like a lab rat than an artist. He once confided in a friend, "He pushes you past what feels human. You trust him, but some days you just want to scream." Howard, being the diplomat he is, saw it differently. In interviews he said, "Cillian is fiercely dedicated, but sometimes he mistakes intensity for conflict." It was that very clash that created a rift between them. And it came to a head during a brutal sequence where Murphy's character collapses onto a lifeboat. After hours in freezing water, Murphy refused to do another take. "I'm done," he said, exhausted. "If you want it colder, you can play the part yourself." Howard, ever the professional, simply replied, "We'll warm you up, then finish." They did. But that warmth never really returned. Years later, when asked if he'd work with Howard again, Murphy said, "Ron expects absolute surrender. I'm not sure I have that to give anymore." Howard, as always, took the high road. He later explained in a podcast, "Cillian is brilliant, but some actors confuse discomfort with discovery. For me, they're often the same thing." Did their feud end? Well, not really. They never publicly trashed each other, but there's no doubt their working relationship cooled. Rumor has it Howard wanted Murphy for 13 Lives in 2022, but the offer never made it to him. And then there's number 3, Russell Crowe. If you think Ron Howard had it easy with Crowe after Beautiful Mind, think again. Sure, that film was a critical triumph, but there were whispers on set about creative clashes between the two. Crowe, a method actor, was deeply committed to his characters, while Howard, ever the architect, valued precision, order, and discipline. Their working relationship teetered on the edge during Cinderella Man, where tensions boiled over. Howard later called that experience the toughest film of my life. And it's no surprise why. Crowe pushed himself and everyone around him harder than anyone anticipated. Their dynamic shifted, and the once promising partnership crumbled under the weight of their differing approaches. By the end of it, Howard had learned a hard truth. Some creative forces just don't mix. It's a theme you'll see again and again with Ron Howard. His patience, his discipline, his commitment to his craft, but also his breaking point. These are the actors who once stood beside him, but for one reason or another, fell out of favor. And while Hollywood's nicest guy may still wear that calm exterior, behind it is a man who's seen it all, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And when it comes to working with some of the biggest stars in the world, sometimes even Ron Howard's patience runs out. Filming began in 2004, and from the moment the cameras rolled, the set felt like a powder keg ready to explode. Russell Crowe stepped onto the set like a general preparing for battle, and according to one crew member, that's exactly what it felt like. Crowe wasn't there to be directed. He was there to take charge. He questioned everything: the lighting, the camera angles, the pacing of emotional moments. He had a vision, and it didn't always align with Ron Howard's. During one tense boxing scene, Crowe reportedly yelled across the ring, "You don't understand the character's pain." Ron Howard, the calm, composed director, didn't shout back. He didn't even move. He simply stood there, silent. But that silence, it was deafening. Crew members later said it felt like the kind of silence that speaks louder than any outburst. As production dragged on, things only got more intense. Crowe insisted on reshooting entire monologues, claiming he didn't believe in the emotion behind them. Howard, determined to keep the film on schedule, found himself stuck in a struggle where he was trying to build a masterpiece while riding a bucking bull. He told the producers, "Working with Russell is like trying to build a church while riding a bull." The film turned out to be a triumph. Cinderella Man was critically acclaimed, and Crowe delivered one of his most grounded performances. But when the press started asking about the possibility of them teaming up again, Howard's smile said it all. "Once was enough," he told one interviewer. Crowe, years later, didn't sugarcoat the tension either. "Ron and I just have different rhythms," he admitted. "He's meticulous. Every shot is measured, every emotion planned. I'm chaotic. I need to feel it at the moment. We just collided." Their final conversation after Cinderella Man wasn't filled with insults or arguments, just a quiet exhaustion. They shook hands, made a polite promise to stay in touch. And then they went their separate ways, knowing they would never work together again. Over time, the edges softened, but the distance remained. In 2019, when asked if he'd ever work with Crowe again, Howard's response was telling. "Russell is a force of nature. You don't direct a force, you survive it." Crowe, in his own way, showed respect for Howard in a 2020 interview, saying, "Ron's one of the best. We just approached the mountain differently." Then there's number 4, Tom Cruise. It's hard to imagine Ron Howard, the calm, steady director known for films like Apollo 13 and A Beautiful Mind, clashing with anyone. But in 1992, he met his match in Tom Cruise on the set of Far and Away. At the time, Cruise was untouchable. He had conquered the box office with Top Gun and earned respect with Born on the 4th of July. Howard, on the other hand, was carving out a reputation as the director who could turn chaos into clarity. Together they seemed like the perfect fit. On set, however, it became a slow-burning war. From the first week of filming in Dublin, the tension was palpable. Cruise, always energetic, wanted everything to be bigger. Sweat, screams, fury, the raw pulse of life. Howard, the quiet perfectionist, wanted the opposite: patience, precision, subtlety. The two styles collided constantly. During one rain-soaked take, Cruise stopped in the middle of the shot, threw off his gloves and shouted, "This doesn't feel real." Howard, unfazed, simply replied, "Real isn't about noise, Tom." The air between them froze. And that freeze would linger throughout the entire shoot. Even Nicole Kidman, caught in the middle, tried to play peacemaker between the two, but by then, the damage was already done. Crew members later described the set as being like a boxing match without the punches. Lines were rewritten, new takes were demanded, and there was constant arguing about whether Howard's steady, controlled direction was stifling the fire that crews wanted to ignite. Slowly, Howard's trademark calm started to slip. In the background, he began shooting extra coverage behind Cruise's back, just in case the actor decided to change his delivery again. In post-production, insiders say Howard called the whole thing a marathon of control disguised as collaboration. When Far and Away finally premiered, critics admired its grand scale, but many pointed out its uneven tone, something that could be attributed to the tug-of-war between two vastly different approaches. Months later, Howard spoke about the experience with his usual diplomatic restraint, though there was an edge to his words. "Some people confuse passion with chaos," he remarked. It wasn't a direct shot at Cruise, but everyone knew who he was talking about. Cruise, for his part, didn't seem to hold a grudge, at least publicly. In a 2002 interview, he called Howard a consummate professional, but with a grin he added, "We just see filmmaking differently. Ron wants control. I want combustion." The two men have never worked together again. When asked in 2019 if he'd direct Cruise again, Howard's response was as measured as ever but final. "Tom's intensity is extraordinary. But sometimes, the energy on set needs to flow in more than one direction." Then there's number 5, Chevy Chase. Ron Howard has always believed filmmaking should strike a balance, and calm leadership guiding creative chaos into order. So when Universal suggested teaming him up with Chevy Chase for a big-budget comedy in the late 80s, Howard didn't hesitate to turn it down. His response to producer Brian Grazer was blunt, "I won't babysit a hurricane." By that point, Chase's reputation for being difficult had already preceded him. On Saturday Night Live, he clashed with castmates and directors. On film sets, he was known for walking off mid-scene, mocking co-stars and clashing with producers. Howard, who valued harmony, wanted no part in it. When Chase caught wind of Howard's refusal, he reportedly scoffed, saying, "Howard only works with nice guys. Must be boring as hell." Howard's reply was cool and cutting. "That's exactly the point." It was a simple statement, but it captured the essence of their divide. Chase thrived on chaos, while Howard built his career on control. Decades later, when stories about Chase's temper resurfaced thanks to Community, Howard was asked if he'd direct him now. His answer was swift and clear. "Some chaos isn't worth capturing on film." The two never worked together, never reconciled, and likely never will. In the end, Howard chose peace over spectacle, and Hollywood quietly agreed with his decision. And then, number 6, Marlon Brando. In the mid-1990s, Ron Howard got the chance many directors dream of, a shot at working with Marlon Brando, the living legend of The Godfather and On the Waterfront. For Howard, then one of Hollywood's most disciplined directors, it was supposed to be the crown jewel of his career. Instead, it turned out to be one of the most harrowing experiences of his life. From the moment Brando arrived on set, the storm began. He was restless, moody, and openly dismissive of structure. He refused rehearsals, demanded cue cards all over the set because he wouldn't memorize lines, and rolled his eyes at Howard's meticulous direction. During one particularly tense afternoon, Brando stopped mid-scene and barked, "This dialogue is garbage. Rewrite it now." Howard, ever the diplomat, tried to reason with him. Brando simply smirked and disappeared into his trailer for 3 hours. When he returned, he announced he'd given his character a new accent. No warning, no explanation, just chaos. Howard, usually patient to a fault, was pushed to his limit. Crew members later recalled the director pacing behind the monitors, jaw clenched, whispering to a producer, "This isn't acting. It's sabotage." Within weeks, Brando's antics had derailed the entire production. Scenes fell apart, Costs skyrocketed, and the studio was furious. What started as Howard's dream collaboration ended in disaster. When the project was officially shut down, Howard quietly said to his team, "Genius is no excuse for madness." Brando, for his part, shrugged it off in interviews. When asked about the failed film, he simply said, "Directors today want control, not truth. I don't have control." It was the classic Brando response. Cryptic, arrogant, and dismissive. Howard, however, refused to ever speak Brando's name again publicly. Privately, though, he confided to colleagues that the experience had forever changed him as a filmmaker. Working with Marlon Brando, he later admitted, was like trying to reason with a hurricane. The two never reconciled. By the time Brando passed away in 2004, Howard had long since stopped chasing greatness through chaos. Instead, he built his later career around the opposite: calm, precision, and collaboration. Brando remained, in Howard's eyes, the cautionary tale that would never be forgotten. And though Howard never criticized Brando openly, those who know him best say that one fateful ordeal taught him the clearest lesson of his career. Never mistake unpredictability for brilliance. Some storms, he realized, just aren't worth weathering. Ron Howard's story, in the end, isn't just about the 6 actors he refused to work with. It's a story about the quiet power of discipline in an industry fueled by ego. But what do you think? Was Ron Howard right to draw the line? Or should genius always come before harmony? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more revealing stories about Hollywood's hidden rivalries and untold truths behind the stars.